Ready? All right. Welcome back to the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. Tom Harris, welcome to the show.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
Thanks, Alex.
Happy to have you here. So I'll give the audience a little background on who you are, why you're here. So Tom is, when I met you, I feel like you're somebody that has a story that maybe resonates with a lot of our clients, and that you are, and I don't want to say too much, but you're kind of on the cusp of retirement. You've had a good career, and you're somebody that's done a lot of leadership type roles throughout your career. And I think you have a good perspective on this kind of thing, but really looking at what does retirement mean to you and those kinds of things. Before we get into all that, I guess I'll kick us off by allowing you to give yourself a better introduction, but tell me a little bit about your career and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I would say my career, Rochester native. So I have worked in Rochester in the area my whole life. I've gone through a couple of different aspects in my career over the years and focus of my work. But primarily there's been a common theme around educating and developing others. I started off at a very large manufacturing organization here in Rochester many years ago. And the focus there was on operation excellence. And so I got very much into how to effectively design systems and create processes, if you will, to drive value. And then I had a great opportunity to kind of change gears. Again, got more into the education space, went back and got my master's degree in education, and then took a job doing leadership development at another large organization here in Rochester that morphed into a couple different jobs in my career at that organization, but always again with this theme of development and supporting others in their career aspiration.
Okay. What does leadership development mean? What does leadership development mean, if I can talk?
Yeah.
In like the simplest definition. I'm sure it can mean a lot of things.
Yeah, I would say probably two-pronged. One, it's helping an individual understand their full aspiration, what their motivations are for leadership. And then secondly, most importantly, and their impact on the organization. How do they engage others to really deliver value and get things that need to get done for the organization at large?
Okay, very cool. So you've worn a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
You're at some large organizations. Maybe starting off with like how the world has changed in a lot of ways, but during that career, the kind of company culture and maybe the way that you look at finances on the individual level, there's a lot in that question. So let me break it down a little bit further. What would you say is the biggest thing that's changed in the professional environment in your career?
Obviously technology dramatically impacting things. I would say in my kind of career span, it's been a change in kind of the philosophy approaching leadership.
Okay.
And maybe later on we can talk about some of the bigger influences for me that really drove that kind of my aha moments in that. But just the changing nature of the demographics and the demands of folks who are coming into the workforce today or in the last 20 years, the competitive global market, things that have changed the dynamics, particularly in the US, around what the drivers and pressures are, have forced, in many cases, the change in leadership mindset and what it means to lead and run an organization.
Okay. How do you think, I always look at like different generations, and it's easy to pick that apart. Like my parents' generation did things way different than my generation did. I'm a proud millennial. How do you think the person coming into a leadership role today is different than maybe 20 or 30 years ago? Like at one point you had the old school approach of the boss is in charge, right, and like what he or she says goes. And now maybe you have a little bit more of a, I don't know, like players coach mentality, if you'll even call it that. But what have you seen as a shift there?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. It's obviously different industries are going to play differently, and different unique organizations are going to have their own culture and philosophy. But I think at large, you're spot on. I think the demands, again, of the leadership of the employees for an organization are going to be very different now than they were historical. In the past, my dad, their generation, my early generation, early part of my career, very much command and control, as you said, like old school thinking around, even in terms of your own career aspirations. Gee, I've got to work 80 hours a week. I've got to be willing to move wherever the company needs me. Those kinds of things, I think, have shifted just by the nature of, again, demands upon the businesses themselves, changing technology, changing demand and needs of the employee base. So it's a tricky time, I think, in that transition.
I think you hit on something interesting. So you mentioned like the mentality of I'm going to work 80 hours a week, or I'm going to move from my job. And I think the older generation maybe wears that as a badge of honor.
Oh, yeah.
They're proud to say that they grinded out 80 hours a week, and they did that for 40 years, and they worked harder than everybody else. Whereas I think for the younger generation, like suddenly that doesn't sound as cool anymore. Now it's all, you hear people talk about work-life balance and those ideas.
Yeah, I think we're probably still in a transition. I think that's still there's a rub there at times. Again, generationally, there's the expectation, this is what I did, and so now you need to do the same kind of thing. Absolutely. Part of my work in leadership development has been dealing with succession planning and coaching folks for going into executive level positions. And I've had VPs who wear it as a badge of honor. I haven't had a vacation in 8 years. When you think about, okay, hopefully that'll work for you, but pivoting a little bit to your point around like financial and plan, what does it mean to you personally? Having that expectation for folks that are going to succeed you may not be a good plan. For one, you may not keep them. And two, part of the coaching I've done with those folks is think about, so how did you get into that place? Is that something you're motivated to do and it works for you? Great. If you have this feeling that I can't step away for 5 days to go on vacation, that might be a sign or a different problem, right? And how do you address for that? And how is that really making you look in the eyes of others that may be judging you or looking at you for, a future position? So it's not necessarily to change their mind, but it's to give them broader perspective on, think about this from a couple of different facets and what's driving that behavior. Because like you say now, I think in the upcoming generations, like they are clearly looking at that and demanding different things for that. And in the scramble for talent today across the globe, as an organization, again, culture, you need to be able to absorb that. And I think the leading organizations are the ones who are thinking about that and playing differently.
Yeah, definitely. It matters kind of the example you set. And I talk to, for better or worse, I end up talking to a lot of very young professionals. I active on LinkedIn and they reach out and they want to pick my brain. So it's usually a 22-year-old-ish who wants to be a financial advisor and they want to learn from me or get my ideas on where they should go in their career, what like organization they should join. And part of my advice is always, you're not choosing a company as much as you're choosing a mentor.
Yeah.
So in very simple terms, I'm always thinking like, find a mentor that you want to be like. So if you go into that interview and you're talking with a person that's going to be your manager and they're stressed and they're bragging about how they haven't taken a vacation in 5 years and they work 80 hours a week, yes, there can be some merit to you need to work hard, but I'd rather find a mentor that more aligns with my own values and maybe takes good trips and is present in their children's lives and like that kind of thing. So I think organizations have to be careful when they come in with the rule of the heavy fist mentality and you need to work just as hard as me, because I think your top talent is going to find their way into organizations that fit their own values.
Yeah, again, research is really clear in terms of if you're looking to attract and retain future talent, like your ability to be able to flex to that. I absolutely get there's unique things around industries where they need to operate in a certain way. If you want to go down that path, is that your motivation? You need to go in eyes wide open. And to your point, like talk to people, understand, okay, so what are the pros and cons of that? What's it going to mean? I think the whole idea of work-life balance, I think that term has lost favor now. And now it's more around like work-life harmony.
Yeah, I've heard that term.
And I think it's more reality because it's not like a 50-50 split. It's not like, okay, I got to balance this amount of time. It's more the quality of time I'm spending versus the quantity.
Sure.
And recognizing that in certain times in your career, you're going to be spending more time, like you say, in your world. If I'm wanting down the path to be a financial planner, maybe I'm looking to be out on my own. I got to build a book of business. There's things I'm going to have to do at that point in my career, like many careers, that I've got to invest more time in because I'm growing and I'm getting exposure, et cetera. But then there's going to be a point in time where I get a payback on that. So then I can back off a little bit there. So I love your point around like talk to people, get good mentors, who are people down the road before you. And I would offer not just folks that are like you, but other folks that you would think, geez, I don't think that person really maybe operates in the same way I do, but is still worthy of having a conversation to get a broader perspective. I think there's nothing I have found as a developer more helpful than networking, getting peers that you're working with and talking with, and like you say, those mentors and coaches who have been there that can help you out.
Sure. It's all good insight. So how is, going back to your own career, you must have seen a shift over the decades in like how people approach this, but what was your philosophy for how you chose to balance your career ambitions with spending time? I know we talked about some trips you've taken and traveling and like, how have you found that split?
Yeah, I think.
Have you taken a vacation in the last 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And for me, I guess it was maybe more intuitive than, like you say, that idea of harmony. Yeah, there was points in my career when I was working 60, 70 hours a week on certain projects. Like it wasn't 365 days a year. And again, that's a personal thing around, to me, I have never lived to work. I enjoy work. And that's probably more important for me, is understanding what are the things I enjoy doing and being engaged with that somehow. As I mentioned earlier, teaching and developing others has always been a common theme, but that's shown up in a lot of different ways in the work I've done. but that still gets at the core of what motivates me.
Sure.
And as you and I talked about previously, even now that I'm semi-retired, the notion of doing something and still giving that motivates me, that gets me up in the morning. Those are the things that I'm looking for. And the idea that it doesn't have to be tied so much to the income I'm making is just even more freeing.
So you touched on a lot of good things in there. So I want to go back to just the sense of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
So you've had some changes. I hope you don't mind me saying the last year or so.
Yeah.
So how is your mentality today different than it was a year ago when you think of the purpose from your career? Because at some point it does have to be about money, right?
Yeah.
Especially early in your career, you're building and growing, and then you get to a point where maybe you're financially established, and the number one thing you want out of your occupation is no longer a paycheck. Maybe it's something else. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but like, what is that something else, and what does it look like? How does it feel?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, in full transparency, like I had planned on working until 67, so a couple years from now. That plan didn't quite play out as I had expected, which probably is a blessing in disguise because it did give me a chance to pause and explore a little bit more, understand where did I stand, where did my family stand in terms of our financial future. And I think, like you said, you're going to, based on where you are in your life, you're making plans and making sure that you've got the money you need now and for the future. But at the same time, thinking about longevity of, I've thought about this more recently, and I almost think like we need to abandon the term retirement.
Okay.
And I've got a book offer for you. I think we can co-novel a book around reforming this thinking, because there's so much now around. We've got so many options. And so to me, thinking about, okay, I've gotten past a point in my life, in my career, where I had to really be thinking, I'll say percentage-wise of my thinking had to be around income and planning for that. But then now, how do I shift that percentage and start thinking about, okay, so what's important to me? What else can I continue to do? So to me, instead of all the baggage that goes with retirement, okay, you worked, you're done. And now it's okay, now you got to fill these next, hopefully 30 years of something, versus saying it's really more of a chapter in a journey. And I think we're hearing a lot more about that through the different forms of media and people, probably a larger population that are filling that space. But it's funny because I was doing some research for some other leadership development work on some authors. And I don't know if you remember, if you go into a philosophy class in college or not, but Meditations, a bunch of writing from a Roman emperor back 200 years ago.
I've read it.
So Marcus
Aurelius,
Aurelius, right?
Sure.
And the whole idea of Stoicism. And you think about 2,000 years ago, here's this guy who was in a position of having great power in a really weird kind of environment, who was thinking about purpose. And so obviously it's a human thing. Like it's important to have that in our lives. And I think helping people to understand that and figure out for them, what is that purpose going forward? And yeah, this point on a timeline of retirement, okay, that just means you're thinking of different things and you're operating a different way. And the beauty of having folks like yourself in your profession is helping others like me who can say, there's the things you got to think about. And you may not necessarily consider in that future, what could it change? But let's also engage in what's next? What are you going to be doing? Like how you're living. And that to me is that's the special part of it.
Yeah, it's retirement itself is a newer concept. If you really think about the grand scheme of human history, it's only like maybe the last 2 or 3 generations that actually retired.
For sure.
It used to be work until you die, which is morbid, but that's what people did.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's not natural for people to have this just time at the end of their life where they just have no role and responsibility. Like you need to, I think, to be happy, and that's a greater philosophical conversation, struggling today. To be happy, I think you need to have that purpose and attachment. And so it might not always be good to be retired, but if you find something else, of course.
Yeah. And like you say, obviously it's an individual question.
Yeah.
People are going to be whatever they for them. But I think really to explore that, and probably advice for folks who are thinking about different points in their lives, reflect on that question. I don't think it should just happen when you're 50 or 60. Your perspective is going to change over time. But just like we mentioned earlier on, having mentors and folks you're networking with, have a broader perspective and age group in your network to understand what are people doing. There's so much out there that we don't think of that can be so inspiring. You're like, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think the person that has the hardest time in retirement with this part of it is usually the guy that we described earlier that's working 70, 80 hours a week. And they do that their entire career, and then they retire when they're 65, and like they've got 80 hours to fill. Where somebody with a more traditional, healthy, what we call a healthy life balance, maybe they're working 40 hours a week, but they've got hobbies and interests and other things to do. Like some of the most successful retirees I know are people that, like teachers are great at this because they're forced every summer forced, but they have every summer to explore new things, get into golf and hobbies and hiking and trips and travel. So like they practice retirement for years, and then when they are retired, they know where they want to spend their time and things they want to do, and they've got better relationships because they've had that time to fill. So something to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah. It's and the notion of recreating yourself. Again, going back as a leadership developer, and the last role that I had was even more so around looking at transforming work. And the idea of organizations looking at skills. So abandoning, okay, we're here at degrees that people have had, or here particular career paths have gone down, but more of looking at skills and skill sets as being a commodity in the workplace. That's the currency. And again, part of that's driven by the lack or the struggle to get effective talent. And so looking at people differently around, okay, Alex has had this background, but what are the skills he's got that this role might be very different than what he's done in the past? There are incredibly transferable skills or analogous skills that you've got that can be harvested here, and you can be great success in that. And so even just changing our mind frame around, this is my career, this is what I've done, is if I have to keep doing that. And like, again, broadening the notion of examining what's the inventory of skills that I have. And oh, by the way, what else am I doing to continue to develop myself throughout my life is critical. And again, just leveraging some of the experience I've had with working with very senior leaders and successful leaders. Yeah, there's different personality types, and we think a lot of them might be type A's, and yep, there are. Obviously high drivers, and it makes sense. But the other thing I've seen common that I think all of us can borrow from is some of the discipline they have. Many of them are very focused on their health and wellness. They exercise regularly. They find time for it in their busy schedule as VPs or CEOs. And to your point too, around other involvement. Now, it benefits them to be sitting on other boards and things like that. They build networks and they have peer connections that way. But to your point, those folks who are successful in having that kind of life, when they leave that position, they've already got built in, again, those other kind of things to follow, if you will, or ways to dedicate their lives. But again, there's nothing that prevents any of us from doing those things, having those connections. And again, not waiting until you're retired to say, okay, I'm going to start doing that.
Sure. Lay the foundation while you're still working to meet the people and do that. And so are you yourself involved in, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but are you involved in other organizations outside of your profession?
Some, for sure. I just got an idea and inspiration from another one of your podcasts.
Great. Tell me about it.
With. I think it's an opportunity to leverage my background and help young emerging leaders. So John.
Okay. It's John.
John.
Sheldon?
Nope.
No?
Hyphenated last name. I apologize.
How we met.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
And I saw on LinkedIn, he's recently like co-chair for Greater Rochester Finger Lakes United Way Emerging Leaders.
John is a great networker. He's involved in everything.
Introduce me to John.
I would love to introduce you to John.
I'd love to offer up if there is some way that I and or resources I've got available to me, friends and network, to help support that group. If there's some way to provide resources and things like leadership development. But yeah, again, those are things that kind of pop up that you don't think about.
Yeah.
That you got to watch for and say, hey, could I do something? Again, engage as things I like to do. If I can offer my time and energy that will help others.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
There's a lot of opportunity out there for, if you're approaching it from a, I want to help people perspective versus I'm looking for a career to make money perspective. I think there's a ton of organizations that for someone like yourself, especially with the leadership experience, I think to go in and really make a difference. There's a lot out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like you say, to me, the whole notion of kind of retirement planning, I am probably on the range. I probably am more of a worrier, quote, planner. I'm trying to let that go a little bit, but it's also like really exciting, I think, as well, is to figure out what are the new possibilities.
Yeah.
And that's part I want to lean into. And I would offer that folks who are thinking about this, like that. Yeah, there's a lot that can be overwhelming when you start talking about, I got to plan for healthcare and taxes and all that good stuff. But once you feel like you have that plan taken care of, again, if you might fall camp of you got to have that planning in place, it just frees you up to really think about the things that are going to make you happier.
Yeah, I think that's good. So if we want to, you mentioned redefining retirement or like the way you see that word is different now, maybe. How do you think we should define retirement, or is retirement just not the right word for somebody like yourself? Maybe it's financial freedom and then, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is true. Like I say, for me, retirement probably isn't the word. Only because I connotate retirement with, okay, I'm at a certain age, and that means that you decline and all those kind of things that happen. Versus, like I say, I think it's just absolutely financial freedom to allow you to do some different things. I would like to still work. I
Mhm.
want to still work. So again, I don't want to just volunteer all my time. I'd like to continue to get some kind of return on the value that I think that I can offer and give, but to know that I don't have to go out and look for earning a certain amount.
Sure.
Or it has to be full time, or that it can't be like project work or gig. And we got the gig market now around doing things that are contractual and short term kind of things. So the options I think now are better than ever. And I think it's only going to continue to get that way.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess to me, it's that word freedom is probably the better term, that you reach a point in your life that it's difficult. This notion of that you've worked to get this money, the notion that your money is going to work for you now. And again, that for myself and probably for a lot of people, that's a tough concept.
It is there's a really big hurdle. I know we've talked about this before, but like you work your entire life and you save and you make sacrifices to put money away for the future for retirement. And then one day you wake up and you're retirement age or you're retired, you're not working anymore. And then you got to flip this mental switch in your brain to start to spend that money that you saved. So taking distributions out of accounts is a really big mental hurdle that like at some point you need to give yourself the freedom to spend that money, not feel guilty about it, and enjoy life. And
Exactly.
I think it's hard for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's just based on your upbringing and all that. I know one of the things you'd asked me before about my approach to spending in itself. And I was raised in a house that was, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Inflation was high, unemployment was high. I never felt that as a kid. Middle class upbringing, 4 kids, mom and dad. But as a child, I never felt like I didn't have anything. You know, I mean, we got out of vacation and all that kind of stuff, had a nice home. But the lesson there was like, don't spend beyond your means. And if it actually spend a little bit less than your means. So you are putting money away and things like that. And thankfully, we're blessed. My parents had great retirement. And so I think that notion that we get around like having to keep up with others or you got to have the new shiny thing, like that never really was something that was part of my upbringing and never really anything I needed to worry about.
Sure.
So that I think that in itself is really freeing because it does give you an option to do. I've had great experiences in my life, done some great traveling, but we planned for it. We saved for it.
There's something to knowing that you can afford it too. I think of myself like early in my career when I didn't have the money for a lot of things. And I thought, oh, like, I want to have a nice car. That was something that like seemed like a cool goal to a 22-year-old me.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I've gotten to a point in my career where I can afford to go do that, but I don't want it.
Yeah.
Because I know that I can have it. It's just like there's zero appeal to me right now of going out and buying like a BMW or something. That just is not something I ever think about. But 10 years ago, it was like a goal.
Yeah. Like I say,
things change fast.
different priority.
I want to dive back in, and we're getting to the end of our time, but you had mentioned earlier just your work with like executives and people in that, and the idea of transitioning to the next generation of leaders. And you might be more the exception than the rule when it comes to the way that you think about this stuff because of the experiences you've had. But what is a sign to you that a leader needs to step down or make way for the new generation, if that makes sense? So I'm sure you work with people at the end of their career that are hanging on, or they're doing the thing where they tell you they're going to retire in 2 or 3 years, and then 2 or 3 years go by and they're still going to retire in 2 or 3 years. And
like you say, usually the signs are pretty obvious. I would say what happens, again, my experience is what happens is you start getting, people are bumping up against that individual. And I'll say in the industry, we call those individuals blockers.
Okay.
And so you have very high qualified, very aspirational talent who begins to go elsewhere. So it's more of an organizational impact around, okay, we're going to have some talent here because we're not making way for. And to me, again, this gets back to individually working with folks. It becomes really more of a coaching conversation with them that how do they want to be remembered? How do they want to go into the organization? And as more importantly, probably is what's next for them. To your point, some people become so personally identified with that role or that work. Absolutely, it's difficult for them to step away from it. To me, it's largely if someone assigned for me is if they aren't keeping up with or can't really keep up with the change in the organization, with the environment, the marketplace, those are the early tells, right? Because some things that they've done it in the past, but now it's becoming a burden for them. It's really more of that coaching conversation. Isn't this becoming isn't this dragging you down a little bit?
Do you really want to do this?
Yeah. So that to me, I think is a first tell for any of us personally. Like things are going around beyond me, outside of me, or beyond my capabilities. Am I in a place where I want to go after that? Or no? To me, that should be a first tell for someone personally around.
Okay.
It's time for me to step away.
All right. So that's our advice for the old guys stepping away. We'll end on this. What is your piece of advice to a 20-something-year-old getting started in their career and they want to grow and move and get up the ranks in a company?
Yeah, primarily just be a sponge. Learn everything you can, build relationships. You mentioned before, there is no better teacher than mentors, and learn from everybody. Learn from good leaders, bad leaders, right? Because bad leaders, most of us could probably all recall somebody we worked for that was really terrible, and we had a ton of lessons in that.
Sure.
So always learning. There's absolutely no better.
Love it. Always be learning. We'll end on that. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Sure. We did it. How'd we do? Awesome.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax or legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Tom Harris is not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Cultivate Financial Planning.